Okay, this is now Tarot Lesson 174. And it's going to be the last 4 cards in the Celtic Cross about what do I do with Substack. And I have a couple of introductory points. I've got my notes here. So to begin with, a little while ago, this came up in a reading, the Five of Pentacles. And so I heard myself, as I was talking about the card, say the man must have cold feet, right? Because he's walking barefoot in the snow. And then it struck me. And I started with tarot cards in 1976, I think. And that's like 50 years ago. And so I don't remember ever saying this to anybody ever before, but the man's got cold feet. And then I remembered or realized that in English, if you've got cold feet, or if you get cold feet, you sort of lose your nerve, or you lose your courage. You were going to do something, then you get cold feet, so you didn't do it. And I don't think I've ever said this about the Five of Pentacles. Maybe I did. So I'm telling you this partly because it's interesting maybe for you about the Five of Pentacles, that the person's got cold feet. And that can mean they lose their nerve. And that's why they're out in the snow. Maybe because they had cold feet, or because they didn't have confidence in themselves in some way. Maybe that's why they're now walking barefoot in the snow. But the other thing is, I began this like 50 years ago. So if you had been going for 10 years or longer, I just like to make the point, there's always more. You're never going to reach the end, or we're never going to reach the end of full understanding of every card, because there's something that's totally obvious when you think about it or when you notice it. But I went for 50 years without actually noticing it. So that's the Five of Pentacles. The other thing is, somebody left a comment about my Substack account, or whatever it's called, is the Tarot Tune-Up is what the name of the account is. I'll put a link down below for the follow-up to the last video. But if you go to Substack and type in Tarot Tune-Up, and I'm calling it the Tarot Tune-Up because really it's for people who already know a bit about the tarot. And if you tune up an engine, you make it go better, or you make it more efficient. And it's kind of like the reason for the Substack articles and posts is so that people can become more efficient or better, or their tarot engine will run better. So now this, and I need to look at my notes because I've got stuff to go over here. So if you remember, I talked about the tarot, about the chariot as being a vehicle, and the vehicle can be the Substack account, but there's also a driver, and the driver can be me, right? And it's upside down. So either I need to look at and become more comfortable with the site itself, with the Substack itself, because I don't really get it. It's like, I think it's a bit confusing, but the opposing force was the magician. So I've got lots of ideas. I'm not going to get stuck for something to say. But then it occurred to me a couple of days ago when I first started making notes about this. In a vehicle, you've got a driver. You've also got a passenger. Or maybe there's a passenger. So maybe the spread, my Substack experience in this Celtic Cross, is about going from being a passenger to becoming the driver. So instead of being carried along by the Substack app itself, and it's up to me, or my challenge is to learn to drive Substack, or to learn to drive the content, or to turn the content into something that will help you, the reader, drive the tarot in the way that you want. Do you know what I mean? Instead of being passive, which is kind of what a passenger is, instead of being passive, you turn to being active when it comes to the tarot. So you get more confidence because you're no longer dependent on meanings that you read in a book. So it maybe the with a Celtic Cross, you look at the first two cards and you get an idea of something that it means, a basic idea, and then you follow that basic idea through the rest of the spread, rather than look at the spread as being 10 different things or 10 different ideas that you somehow got to put together. Maybe you take your start from the first couple of cards to give you, I don't want to say theme, but to give you a kind of the journey that you're going on. And then you look at these other cards as being refinements of the journey, or situations that you go through that will make the journey interesting or difficult or easier. And I was thinking of a movie. If you think about a movie that you like, you don't, and you're telling somebody about it, you don't tell them everything that happened in the movie. You pick out one or two points. Let's say it's. I was trying to think of a movie. There's one called Black Hat, which I really liked, with Chris Hemsworth, I think, or Liam Hemsworth, and it's about, he's a hacker, and it's so. I'm not going to go into telling you the story right now, but it's a bit like, if I'm telling the story to somebody, I pick and choose incidents from the movie that give an idea of what it's about or how the character develops. So in the same way, we could look at this Celtic Cross. So the basic idea maybe, and this is what I'm going to talk about today, let's say the basic idea is, how do you go from being a passenger to being the driver of anything? In this case, of posting to Substack or developing that channel or that outlet. So, okay, so we've looked at various things up until now. So maybe if we think about the idea of being a passenger, and I want to become the driver, with the Nine of Cups here, I can become the driver, because that's a wish card and it's upright. So all your wishes will come true. So I can become the driver. I'm thinking about it here. I've got an idea, one coin, but I've got more to choose. So the next steps have to be thought about, or are still being thought about. With the Emperor up here, I can become the driver, right? Because the Emperor's in charge. But with the King of Pentacles upside down, I don't immediately become the Emperor. I don't immediately become the driver, because with the King, who gives commands and orders and is in control, upside down, it's a bit like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And this King of Pentacles is 1 step back on my journey to becoming the driver. So now we've got the 7th card, which is the Justice card upside down. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Justice as on its own, or as a card, and this is because, and then I'll relate it, I hope I can remember to relate it back to the idea of becoming the driver, right? Because that's the Chariot upside down. So only because a little while ago I came across somebody talking about Plato's Republic, and at the beginning of the Republic, Socrates wants to know what is justice, and I immediately thought, okay, what is justice? And so in the Republic, Plato or Socrates talks about, he begins with the legal definition of justice, but then the whole book sort of transforms or morphs into, how do you conduct your life? So with the Justice card, it's not just about making a decision maybe, it's more about how do you live everything? How do you live your whole life? Or how do you conduct your life? What kind of decisions do you make? What's the reason for making that decision? Are you aware? And because the Justice card has got a pair of scales here and they're balanced, maybe with the Justice card and with living your life, we're meant to find balance and harmony. And then when we're at peace or at rest or in some way in a harmonious state, then you take action shown by the sword in the right hand. Is that can't see upside down. Okay, that's the sword there in the right hand. So it's about how do you conduct your life, and that made me think of conductor. and the conductor in an orchestra. And I know a couple of people, one in particular she was first violin in an orchestra. And I asked her once about why do you need a conductor? Because they don't seem to do anything. They just stand there and wave their arms around. But the friend Andrea said, it's because you need somebody to dictate the tempo. Because you can play the notes maybe at the right speed, but you need to periodically refer to the person in charge who sets the rhythm and who gets you to speed up or slow down or to emphasize one part of the orchestra over another. So I'm saying that because if I can read my notes here, with the Justice card, it's about getting the right rhythm. And there's something about when you're setting the rhythm or the speed, pauses are really important. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, sometimes you stop talking. And people can digest what you've been talking about, or they can come up with a new thread or a connected idea that goes with what you were talking about. But you need pauses and you need moments of silence to keep on track maybe, or to get you to appreciate what you're talking about or what you've been going through. And that can be what the Justice card represents here. So going back to me being the driver of my Substack account, I should remind myself periodically to stop and think again, and rather than just charge ahead and do something because it's been 3 days since I last made a post, or with these videos, I kind of sometimes have to not exactly force myself, but I sometimes think I should make a video today, and then 3 days later, I think I should make a video today. But with the Justice card upside down, maybe that's what's important for how to become the driver of the Substack account. Take my time and allow pauses so that I can sort of catch up with my own thinking, or catch up with where the tarot is right now. And then the influence of other people is a Page of Cups reversed. So a couple of things to say about that. One is the card in the 8th position over here shows the influence of other people. And I looked up the etymology of influence, and it has to do with flowing in. So the card in this position, influence is like fluid. And if something is fluid, it's sort of up and down and changeable. So the influence of other people, the card that's over here, isn't solid. So what you get from outside, what you get from other people, it can be good or it can be bad, but it's also not, don't look upon it as being solid. It can be changed, it can be controlled, it can be ignored if you choose to ignore it. So the influence of other people, maybe this is the readers of the Substack account, and because it's the Page of Cups upside down, pages represent young people. And so maybe the audience for the Substack, I should remember that maybe what's important is they lack experience, or some people are going to be brand new to the tarot. Other people have been at it for a while. But just the point with the Page of Cups, I should remember that the readers are going to be at a certain situation, a certain position in their studies. But I shouldn't forget that some people are just beginning, and maybe there's value in going over basic information for the benefit, or to get experienced people to remember what it was like at the beginning, instead of forgetting that we all began somewhere. And it's easy to forget that we began somewhere and just assume that we're getting better and better. But there's something about going back to the basics periodically, because you see the basics in a new way. Like last time I talked about 78 cards being 1, the Fool, and 77, And so just that whole looking at the numbers again, I've looked at it maybe once a year, not once a year, every year, but I look at it periodically. And when I look at 77, I get a new idea about what I might do with 77. In the same way, I looked at the Five of Pentacles and thought cold feet can mean lack of losing your nerve. And so every time you go back to the basics, even though you know it, you can look at it in a different kind of a way. And that may be what I should be doing with, or don't forget to do that with the Substack articles. And then the ninth card is the hopes and fears. So this is about the future. And it can be about how I can't remember what I wrote down about this, the Eight of Pentacles. So here we've got, I'm thinking about how to draw it, because I'm going back to the idea that instead of giving a different interpretation of the Chariot reversed, I'm taking the idea of how do you go from being a passenger to being a driver, and that's what the whole spread is about. I could have chosen something else about how to find meaning in life, because the Chariot is philosophy, or can be philosophy and expansion. So it can be how to expand, and I look at all cards that way, or how to develop a philosophy. I can look at all the cards that way. But I'm choosing the idea of becoming a driver instead of a passenger. So how does becoming a driver relate to this Eight of Pentacles? And so I don't know what to say. It's upside down. So, and it's a card for the future, because so this is what may come. And I mentioned before, I want to become the emperor, or the idea of being an emperor and being in control, or traveling my own path, so to speak, is here. So this in some way relates to the Eight of Pentacles reversed. And we've got the King of Pentacles here, upside down. So, and we've got 7 over here. I'm not going to go into this right now, but I'll probably look at it in the follow-up, which will be on Substack in a few days. So the hopes and fears are the Eight of Pentacles upside down. I don't think, I'm afraid that I'm not going to have anything to talk about. But we've got what we've got going on in the picture is iteration. So you do something and you do it again and you do it better. So maybe what it's telling me is, if I want to become the driver, rather than always look for new information or new stories or new, I don't know what, new spreads, instead of doing that, go back to the basics, going back to this card, look at the basics periodically and get more out of the same information than I did last time, rather than always trying to find new material. And the final outcome is the Five of Cups. And we've got 3 cups knocked over and 2 remain. So in a way, maybe the 3 cups is being the passenger, or things don't work out, or I feel the need to be transported or carried along. But if I look at things, if I turn 180 degrees and look at things from a different viewpoint, I'll do better. But also it's saying that in every situation, you've got things that don't work and things that do work. And so maybe the point is choose or identify what works or what's useful, rather than be sidetracked or incapacitated and held back and feeling unable because of what hasn't worked or what doesn't work. And one last thing is, there's a fellow called Paul Arden, who used to be, he died, but he was in advertising, I think, and he wrote a couple of books. One was called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. And he's got another one, and I've got them somewhere, but they're in a box somewhere and I can't find them. But anyway, one of the things he talked about, which I think is relevant for this card, he says when you're trying to be creative or when you're being creative, and he says, whatever you think, do the opposite. And so maybe that's what's implied by this card. Whatever you think, do the opposite. So if you've got what you think is a solution to a problem and you're maybe not sure about it, do the opposite and see where that leads. So that was that. I can't think of anything else to say right now, but I'll put together a little written version of this with maybe a bit more explanation if I left things out, or maybe it'll be more clear if it's written down. Because that's the thing. Sometimes with spreads, it can, and any card can take you in multiple directions at the same time, and it can be awkward to try to follow one direction all the way through. And so, if you've got something written, you can take different views of the same card and develop them a bit. I think that's what I'm going to try and do in the Substack follow-up to video 174. So that was it. Have a good day, okay? Bye-bye.